PowerPlayChess, brought to you in association with Kagi.
It's the morning after the night before. As you can see, a different backdrop. I'm on the move at the moment, but the show goes on. Let's have a look at what happened in round 10 of the candidates. So, if you recall, there were two leaders going into this round, Gukesh and Nepomniachtchi. But I want to look at a game from Fabiano Caruana and Alireza Firouzja. So, Firouzja struggling at the moment in the tournament. Caruana also not really hitting his stride. He lost against Nakamura, and then in the next round, he drew against Abbasov, so he's faltering at the moment. Could he try and hit back? Could Firouzja also try and get back in the tournament as well? So here we go. Let's have a look at their game from round 10. Caruana playing white, e4, and then c5 from Firouzja. He wants a fight. I mean, he said he just wants to go for it. And it's an open Sicilian. And what kind of open Sicilian are we going to get? It's the good old Najdorf. Yes, and another little pawn move at the side of the board. Well, as we saw, if black wants to play e5, remember that's what Nakamura did in the very first round against Caruana, actually a dubious move, then because of bishop b5 check. So a6 it's partly about covering the b5 square, but later on black wants to play this advance with b5. The question is, does this lose too much time? Well, no. Over the years, it's been discovered that actually black is okay in this position. Bishop e3 was always Caruana's favourite system against the Najdorf. But he played rook g1. So that's a little bit unusual. I mean, the intention is clear. White wants to advance with g4. But it looks a bit funny to play the rook to this square. I suspect that they looked at Alireza's previous games and just thought, well, he's not very experienced against this. He's played a few times, but he's switched his systems, which is perhaps an indication that, he's not too familiar with this. And indeed, Alireza thought for almost 13 minutes before playing h5. And bishop c4. Well, what's h5 about? I mean, also a slightly strange move, of course, preventing g4. And often the move h5 can be very useful in the Najdorf, gaining space on the king side. And you can sort of get away with it because, black has a solid pawns on the king side. Bishop c4 from Caruana played very quickly. And Alireza goes into a kind of dragon with g6, except with the inclusion of these odd moves. But, I mean, normally black wants to prevent g4 anyway in the dragon, so not a bad idea. Bishop g5, and now we see the drawback of playing h5 is that the g5 square is weakened. So, I think both sides can be reasonably happy with the outcome of the opening. Now, we've seen in the past systems with knight d7 and, later on b5 and bishop b7. That's the Dragodorf system. But after another think, so clearly Alireza not on very familiar territory, Queen a5 happened. Well, often this move is played in the dragon. And it does look at that bishop. Whoops. That is the phone. I'm just going to click that off. Excuse me. Often played in the dragon. Excuse me. That's distracting me a little bit. But here, of course, it makes sense because it's looking at that bishop on g5. So castles. Yeah, if the queen is hit, then it'll just drop back to c7 anyway. So castles queenside, knight c6, knight b3. Now there's a very specific tactical point behind playing the queen to a5, and that's queen takes bishop. No, this is not a queen sacrifice, because black gets back the queen straight away. So it's a way of just simplifying the position, actually. h4. You could take on h6, but it's quite nice to play h4, because after that exchange, then the knight has to move, white has gained ground. Yeah, nice position for white, actually. Position it feels right. But that's possible for black to play like that. Instead, bishop e6 from Alireza. Now, how do you play here with white? This is already a very interesting moment in the game. So bishop e6, a common kind of move in the dragon, just to neutralize that bishop on c4. Right. I'll have a little drink. Cheers. You have a think. How do you play here with white? It's already a very interesting moment in the game. Slightly unusual position with this queen still on g5. But it's not running away. Cheers. In fact, Caruana missed a good opportunity here. He could have taken and then played this cunning move e5. Now, there's a tactical point to this. I suspect Caruana missed the tactic, which is this. After knight takes pawn, of course, the move you want to make, f4 wins a piece, because it blocks the diagonal here. The queen can now move, so black has to take, and in this case, there are two knights threatened, white wins a piece. So after bishop takes, pawn takes e5, black really has to play pawn takes pawn. But then after this exchange, that puts the rook to a strange square, and knight c5. So white is going to win a pawn back, and black's structure is pretty poor. So that would have been a good opportunity. Caruana missed it, and instead he just ducked back with the bishop. King f8 from Firouzja, and Caruana brings that knight on b3, which actually wasn't doing much, back into the game. An exchange of knights, so that rook is quite nice on b4, on d4 rather, because it can switch to b4 here. There is some potential there. Rook c8, that's generally where the rook belongs in these positions on the semi-open file. f4, so with the diagonal closed, then black really has to exchange. That's a good exchange, a bishop for a queen. And the knight hops into that nice square on g4. So, I mean, that's quite important. If the black knight had to go back, then white has a really nice space advantage. But that foothold in white's position offers black counterplay. Caruana plays a very natural move here, rook f1. The rook is doing nothing on g1, so rook f1, and there's potential to push the pawn. And I really like Alireza's next move. So there's f5 is always in the air, so he ducks back with the bishop. But this is not a passive move. King d2, okay, reasonable. Put the king in the middle. The bishop redeploys to c6. This is a beautiful square for the bishop. As we'll see, that offers black excellent counterplay. It's secure on c6 and slices across to the king side. But knight d5 from Caruana. I mean, I think we can say that white definitely has the more comfortable position here with this lovely space. And this is so often the weak square for black in the dragon, because it's difficult to play e6 because that weakens the d pawn. You can see that's a real target. I mean, this looks fantastic for white anyway with the knight here. And, you know, black has an issue now. You know, what do you do with that knight? I mean, if you exchanged it off, then again, big space advantage. There are targets here, e7 and b7. You know, you can imagine this a4 and rook b4, or targeting the e7 pawn. So this is not an easy position. But Alireza plays f5, striking out. And actually, this is a reasonable way to gain counterplay. Tricky decision for white. You could take on f5. It's tricky. But Caruana decided, right, I don't want to simplify. I just want to maintain this space advantage. And he played c4. So he wasn't... E takes f5 would have led to simplifications. It was possible. But this kind of maintains white's space advantage. It does look very nice for white. And then black has a dilemma. Again, what do you do about that knight on d5? Do you exchange off? If you do, with which piece? But, you know, white always has some space. So king g7. He doesn't want to commit. And Caruana decided to take the plunge. He took on e7. Knight takes. And this is a very delicate move from Caruana. Where does the king go? In fact, I mean, king e1, not a great idea because that lands on the open file. So he played king d1. That's nice. And knight g3 in this case, hitting rook and bishop. Rook e1. Good move. If knight takes rook, then knight takes... And this is quite tough to crack, actually. This bishop is absolutely wonderful here. Protects everything on the queen side. Is really secure. And black is ready to gain counterplay with this rook. Swinging across here. Attacking this pawn. There's potential pin here. And you can see, you know, that bishop is tied. This is actually fine for black. So Caruana instead played rook e1. Knight f5. So, yeah, if knight takes, then knight takes rook. And, well, that shows how strong that bishop is. And this is already very good for black. So Caruana exchanged on f5. And here is another very interesting moment. How should white play here? So material is even at the moment, but these pawns are split. So, you know, black's structure is worse than white's. However, that bishop provides excellent counterplay. So how do you play here? Okay, you have another think, and I'll have another drink of my morning tea. Of course, we'd all like to take this pawn. And if bishop takes pawn, then rook g1 wins a piece. Pin and win. But h4 is a good move. This is now a threat. And, well, let's say this is defended. Rook here. And black gains excellent counterplay in this position. Bishop is still wonderful on this diagonal, on c6. And both white's pawns, in fact all white's pawns in this position are rather vulnerable. Not that b4 is absolutely necessary, but the kingside pawns are vulnerable. You know, that rook can step back here. Black has enough play. So instead, Caruana played bishop d3. Good move. So he's keeping the tension. He's not plunging in too quickly. Definitely has some advantage here with his superior pawn structure, but this is not easy. I think especially with rooks and bishops, often that gives decent drawing chances, you know, in major piece endgames, in the rook endgame, even if sometimes you're just a pawn down. And likewise in the bishop endgame. So again, that can't be taken because of the pin. So Alireza defends the pawn on f5 and rook takes pawn. So Caruana's won a pawn, but the queen side's still absolutely solid for black. Beautiful bishop on c6. I mean, we would like to play h4 here, but that gives white a really strong attack. So rook f6 from Firouzja. Excellent move. So if white were to take here, black has really good counterplay. Something like this. And rook here, it's very hard to see how white is going to make progress in that position when black's pieces are so strong. And, you know, rook on the 7th. No, black is fine there. So instead, Caruana just played c5, defending the rook. And this is a really difficult position again. Really tough. And both players running a little bit short of time. I suspect that if Alireza had had more time here, he might have found the precise sequence to hold this. He played h4, which looks like the most natural move on the board. You know, he played it pretty quickly. I think understandably, it just looks like a good move to sort of fix the pawn on g2. In fact, he should have taken here and played rook d8, which looks a bit weird. You know, after this, seems like white is doing pretty well if you can take here. But this move is really difficult. It's very passive. But the computer shows that this is actually very strong. And the reason is that black threatens to play bishop e6 and then the pawn can be taken. And it's very hard to see how white gets around that. So, for example, after rook d5, rook g8. And again, counterplay down here. Bishop c6. I mean, there are various other things that white can try, but basically black is all right there. But that is a really difficult move to see. So instead, h4 was played. Rook check and rook e5. And now Caruana starts to take control. Defends the f5 pawn. I mean, white has various things here. Rook d8 is very dangerous, actually. But Caruana just played very simply, actually. Bishop f1. I think one of the points of this is not just to protect the g-pawn, but actually it stops black from breaking and exchanging with h3. An exchange on d6. Rook h8. Rook e6 and bishop c4. So rook d8. And now, really important little maneuver from Caruana. At the moment, there's no really good discovered attack. You could swipe that pawn, but you know this one gets taken. This is really strong. King e1. Now, obviously, that pawn can't be taken because of the discovered check. So king g7, and then king f2. I can imagine Caruana breathing a sigh of relief once the king has reached f2. The g-pawn is protected. The king is tucked out of the way. The bishop, rook, and pawn, the extra pawn, give white control. a5. I mean, that's an indication that Firouzja really has no really strong plan here. a3. Why not? Just keep solid for the moment. b5. Bishop d3. Hits the f-pawn. Bishop d5, rook e7 check is a good move. Bishop came back and bishop takes b5. That's basically the end of the game. If rook takes d6, then of course that's a very nasty pin, followed by a winning king and pawn endgame. But yeah, by this stage, black is lost. Rook c7. So, oops, I beg your pardon. That was my laptop doing funny things. Rook c7, yeah, so rook takes pawn, and simplification to a bishop endgame. In this case, it is certainly lost for black, because it's not just the fact that white has this nice distant pass pawn, but also it helps that there's a pawn fixed on a light square, so black always has to take care of that. And here is the decisive little maneuver. King g1, and after that Firouzja resigned. So why did black resign? Well, let's just continue. Black can only wait here. The king steps around to h3. So this pawn is vulnerable. The bishop has to stay here. But that means the b pawn can advance. And, well, let's just have a look at this. This is very nice. So the bishop protects the g pawn, and then king takes pawn. And with 2 extra pawns, that is a really simple win for white. Very patient and delicate play from Caruana in that game. Excellent. So, I mean, so far in this tournament, Fabiano Caruana has not hit his best form. There's no doubt about that. You know, losing to Nakamura and then drawing against Abbasov in the last 2 rounds, that's tough. But this win brings him within half a point of the leaders. So let's have a look at the scores. The other decisive game from round 10 was Nakamura beating Abbasov in a crazy game, but Naka did the biz there in the end. So we've got, I mean, it's really bunching up. In the game between Nepomniachtchi and Gukesh, Gukesh defended very solidly. Nepo didn't push too hard, and that ended in a draw. So they're both on 6 points. And then we have Pragnananda, Nakamura, and Caruana all on 5.5. And then Vidit on 5. I think with 4 rounds to go, Firouzja and Abbasov, they're out of it. 3.5 and 3 points. But any of the top 6, I think, could still win this tournament. It's so tight, it really is. I'm just looking at the score chart there. It's really interesting. Nepo is the only player, if I've got that correctly, yeah, Nepo is the only player undefeated so far, playing really solidly, conserving his energy. But lots of 1s and 0s, or the rest of the scoreboard. Right, well, Tuesday, that's today. I'm losing track completely. Today is a free day. So they resume on Wednesday. And I look forward to reporting from round 11 then. Thanks for watching.